and Arts who recently passed away. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving to number 4 on the agenda, adoption of minutes, the meeting of February 24th, 2015. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Do I have a second? Thank you, Dr. Craffa. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 4, 1, 1, 1. 4A on the agenda is tonight's budget presentation concerning revenue, taxes, and tax cap, which was originally on our last meeting, which got canceled due to the weather, and also the presentation concerning general support and employee benefits.
Okay, as Mr. Barchet just said, it's going to be a rather long presentation, although James promises me that he will limit his jokes to about 4 or 5. They're bad. They're related to today's St. Patrick's Day holiday, but, you know, it's going to add some entertainment. But this is a combination of 2 different budget presentations, as you know, because of the inclement weather that we have experienced this year. But the first piece, the revenue, taxes, and tax cap, really actually should be a relatively brief presentation because much of it was presented in the opening overview of the budget. The second piece, general support and employee benefits, will be a little more detailed because in essence that is the crux of our budget. So, James?
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight to discuss the revenue portion of the budget as well as general support and employee benefits. As the superintendent mentioned, because of the inclement weather on March 3rd, we did combine these 2 presentations, so we will try to move relatively quickly. For those of you who have already started to celebrate the holiday today, you'll probably find my presentation a little less dull than immediately else. So we'll begin. The first one to begin, as the superintendent said, with the little St. Patrick's Day joke. Keep everybody involved. Why don't you ever borrow money from a leprechaun? Why? Because they're always a little short. There's more to come. So we'll move on. Let's take a look at the revenue budget, and we'll move on to the next slide. And it's important to note that New York State requires that school district budgets are balanced. So if we're going to spend $105,436,040, we would need that same amount in revenue to do so. We'll move on to the next slide. And what are the sources of revenue for that $105 million? Well, we have state aid, which is the second largest portion of our revenue budget. We have other revenue, which are payments in lieu of taxes or pilots. This is when the Industrial Development Agency of ISA for Suffolk County, they offer incentives to businesses to move to do business in Hauppauge. That could be, locating their business in Hauppauge, or they could be expanding their business in Hauppauge. And they're offered tax incentives, usually over a period of 10 years. They're removed from the tax rolls, and they pay what are payments in lieu of taxes on a graduated scale. We have appropriated fund balance and appropriations for reserves, and then finally the largest portion of our tax levy here in Hauppauge School Districts and most school districts in New York State is the property tax levy. And this is the breakdown, as I said, of the largest portion of the property tax levy being the light blue area, followed by 12.76% of our revenue comes from state aid, followed by other revenue, those payments in lieu of taxes, and rental income, and tuition income, which is in yellow. The appropriated fund balance, 4.03% in green, and then that little sliver, 0.85% in purple. from our reserve funds. Now, we took a look at this at the meeting some time ago on February 24th. This is our state aid under the current law. And there are a couple caveats with regard to this. As we all know, the governor of the state, Governor Cuomo, has released an executive budget proposal. And with that budget proposal, he also wrote into the legislation a number of progressive education reform proposals. And unlike in every other year in existence, the governor and the executive chamber did not release district-specific aid counts for school districts. What that means is generally the executive and governor puts in their budget to the legislature to begin the budget process. There is a state aid run, and Hauppauge will receive a report of all of the different aid categories and what we will expect to receive here in Hauppauge based on that governor's proposal. This is the first year that hasn't been done. And it's problematic because we generally use that run based on the governor's proposal to formulate our beginning budget until the legislature enacts it. So what we did, we'll just go back to that slide 1 second. So what we did is we took what's current law. And under the current law, this law was put in place a few years ago, it says that school aid will increase by a minimum of the change in the personal income growth for the state of New York. That's 1.7% for next year's budget. So the minimum under current law is that state aid would increase 1.7%. That's what we have used to formulate the current budget proposal. There's an interesting caveat, however. In the actual legislation, in the budget bills that the governor sent to the legislature, it states that the legislature does not enact all of his proposals, all of those quote-unquote reform proposals, then school districts will not receive any increased aid over what they have received in 2014-15. We don't believe that will be the case. We are being conservative by using the 1.7%, but what the governor has done is if those reform proposals were all to be accepted, he did propose a 4.8% increase in state aid to schools in New York, public schools in New York, which is about $1.1 billion. Recently, the Senate has proposed $1.9 billion in their Senate bill, budget bill, and the Assembly has proposed $1.8 billion. So we're hoping and we expect that there will be negotiation as it's going on now, and we'll receive more than what the proposed $1.1 billion that the governor has put forward, and be closer to what the Senate and the Assembly has at $1.8, $1.9 billion. So this is by far what we hope will be the lowest possible state aid that we will receive. And that's an increase of $620,000. It's just important to note that there is a caveat here because it does seem high for a 1.7% overall statewide increase. The things to take note here, building aid is higher by about $250,000, $260,000 because we had that emergency roof project this year at the high school when we received about 13 or so inches of rain over a very short number of hours. Parts of our roof in the high school were compromised. We did do that emergency project. We have an emergency capital project such as the roof. You receive all of your building aid, not over 15 years, but all in the next year. So this number is artificially high by about $260,000 or so because of that. We'll see that for next year. We won't see that in 16, 17. Also to note, there's an increase of $160,000, almost $161,000 in the BOCES aid category, and that's because the district has made a concerted effort to utilize Eastern Suffolk BOCES for services, and we therefore receive about a 36% aid ratio back on all of those dollars that we spent. So total, we're hoping the minimum we'll receive is $620,000 more than we received this year. We'll keep going, we'll take a look, and I mentioned all these things, and we talked about these on February 24th, so we'll keep going. There's a $241,000 in building aid that I mentioned, and we'll keep going. And this is just an important note about where we were in 2008, 2009, my first year as an assistant superintendent here, where we were receiving in state aid, and what we expect to receive under the current law, which I just described. And we're still receiving a little over $1 million less in state support for Hauppauge School District, or a little less than 9%, 8.9% less in state aid in this year, for next year, 2015-16, as opposed to 2008-9, despite the fact that all costs have gone up considerably since 2008-9. Take a look. The members of the board all remember the video that we showed about the gap elimination adjustment last year. Yes, everybody remembers that video? Okay, so we won't show this, but this is on the website in this presentation. I urge you to take a look at it. It was put together by Capital Region BOCES, and it describes in really a fantastic way what gap elimination aid is. And every time we're told that we're receiving an increase in aid, it's really just an increase of the decrease. As I showed you, we're still $1 million less. So any additional aid we get is still just eating away at that reduction that we received back with the gap elimination adjustment. So I encourage you to go to the website and take a look at that. And this is an important note, and this is something that we did share with our legislators, that the Hauppauge School District, if nothing changes, will have lost, in totality, over $12 million because of the gap elimination adjustment. Since it was introduced in the 2010-11 school year, we have lost a significant amount of money in state support that we would otherwise receive. And that's very important to note. There are proposals by the Senate and the Assembly. The Senate's a little more aggressive about eliminating the gap elimination adjustment, and we hope that within the next 2 to 3 years, as we're told, that this will be eliminated. It's important to note that any increase in state aid, anything that's done with the budget, what benefits the Hauppauge School District is really what the New York State Senate proposal is, and putting the money, the additional money, towards reducing the gap elimination adjustment. When the money is placed in foundation aid, which is where the Assembly, New York State Assembly sends to write their bills, budget bills, we receive far less. We do not receive quite a bit of foundation aid. Our combined wealth ratio is much higher than the state average. We're deemed to be a low needs district. So when money is put in foundation aid, we don't fare very well. And that's why we continue to advocate to eliminate the gap elimination adjustment, because that is where we would be helped most. And this is just a breakdown, and I put this together. It's interesting to note, look at Long Island. The first, it goes right to what I was saying. Look at the neon green there, St. Patrick's Day. 12% of foundation aid comes to Long Island. However, with the gap elimination adjustment, which is the negative, the money they take back from us, we're getting 12%, but 21% is being taken away. Of the total amount taken away from the state, 21% of that total amount is from Long Island. And we're only getting 12%. And that highlights the inequity and why it's most important for our school district and most school districts on Long Island to see the gap elimination adjustment taken away, see that money funded, as opposed to putting the foundation formula, because we receive much less the foundation formula. You can see New York City is 42% the foundation formula, but their gap elimination adjustment is only at 24% at this current time. And then just taking a look at how state support as a function of the budget has decreased. 95-96, state aid was 18.9% of the Hauppauge school budget, and in 2015-16, it has continued to decline, and it's 12.8% of our revenue budget. And again, this just highlights, and I put this chart in here to see how state aid has been volatile a bit, but right there in the introduction to the gap elimination adjustment, introduction of that in 10-11, we saw a reduction in state aid of almost 10% in that current year. Remember, we did have reductions because of that. And we have made some strides, but we still have receiving much less than we were. We'll take a look at other revenue now, and this is our other revenue. And one thing to highlight on this chart, which is really the preponderance of the increase of $827,000, is the $691,000 in additional pilots. We were informed by the town of Islip for this current year, we're going to be receiving double the amount of pilot payments, almost an additional $500,000 in pilot payments for this year than we did last year and in many years before, as well as there's some additional progress in Smithtown. So we are forecasting that we are going to see increased pilot money, and that is very fortunate because that is helping offset the property tax levy and any differences that we have in reductions in state aid. It's important to note that the pilot numbers are estimates. They are very loose. Lisa, my office, who I do thank for being here tonight, has worked day in and day out with both industrial development agencies, the ISIP and the Smithtown Industrial Development Agencies, to determine how much we were receiving. But I will tell you that it's very difficult to determine the exact number because nobody, even at the town, really knows how much exactly we're going to receive for this year and especially for next year. We were told we won't have firm numbers for next year until well beyond when the school year begins next year. We'll take a look at the next slide, and this is appropriated fund balance, and we are reducing the amount of fund balance of money left over at the end of the fiscal year that we intend to appropriate to next year's budget to lower the tax levy. And we made a reduction on the revenue side. We also made a reduction on the appropriation side. So we lowered both sides, so it will be neutral. We're not increasing taxes because of this reduction, but as I mentioned in the past, to have $5 billion to appropriate for the next year, you need to make sure you have $5 million left over in your budget. And that's a never-ending cycle. Recently, the Office of the Controller put out some new guidance and has urged districts to move away from this practice, which has been the standard practice for many years, and it's recommended in the past by the Controller's Office. And they have suggested that instead of continuing to appropriate amounts of money and then needing to make sure you have that money left over at the end of the year, you should lower both ends, and that's what we've done. So we've lowered the appropriated fund balance by $250,000, and we've also lowered our budgeting by $250,000, because no longer will we need $5 million left over at the end of the year next year. We'll only need $4,250,000. We kept the funds that we may need for the reserves level with the appropriations for this current year. And this is just an example of where we've been with fund balance. We've been very consistent over the past number of years. We're making that slight reduction, a $750,000 reduction for next year. And how is fund balance derived? Again, this is just highlighting what I said. To gain fund balance, we need to take in revenue more than what was expected, more than what was budgeted. For example, our pilots this year, and you need to underspend the budget. So in this example, we took $200,000 in more than we expected in revenue, and we underspent the budget by $300,000. You have a total fund balance there for $500,000. But again, if you take that $500,000 and appropriate it to next year's budget, you need to make sure you have the same scenario at least next year. Because if you don't have $500,000 the next year, then you have a $500,000 deficit, and that's what you want to avoid. And this is our fund balance as of June 30th, 2014. And what this does show you is that we ended the 13-14 school year with 4% in unreserved fund balance, which is the recommended level and the level set by law at $4.1 billion. And I won't go through the next slides, but this is just a review for the board, and members of the community have this as well. This presentation is online. This is the reserve funds that we do have and the current funding levels in those reserve funds. And we'll take a look at the next page as well, Lisa. These are all of our reserves, including our capital reserve, which currently has a balance of $3.9, almost $3.6 million. Now, we have suggested, we recommended in the budget to appropriate from the Employee Approved Liability Reserve and Retirement Reserve. Take a look at the next slides. You'll see that in the Employee Approved Benefit Liability Reserve, which is used to pay items such as unused sick days when an employee retires as per collective bargaining agreements, there is currently $6.9 million in that reserve. If we take out next year $650,000, we'll have $6.2 million. If we continue to do that, we would be able to use this reserve without any further deposits for 9.7 years. It's important when we do use reserves, we do use reserves that we have a plan, because if you run out of money, then you have a deficit and you have to try to raise your tax levy. And with the tax gap, that's not always possible. Same with the retirement contribution reserve. We start right now at $3.3 million, almost $3.4 million as of February. If we took $250,000 out of there, we'd be left with $3.1 million. And if we continue to do that, we would have the funds useful for 12.5 years without any additional deposits into that particular reserve. This reserve is used to pay the employer contribution rate for the local employees' retirement system. That's not the teacher's retirement system. This is a retirement system that our non-instructional employees are mandated members of. Finally, you have the tax levy. And how do you determine the tax levy? Well, you may think it's this really complicated formula, but it's really not. It's just subtraction, and thankfully for me, it's not Common Core subtraction. At least some people think. So to get tax levy, it's dependent on the expenditure budget, state aid, other revenue, and appropriate fund balance. If you take a look at the next slide, you'll see simple subtraction. As I said, you start with your $105 million, $436,000 recommended budget. You take out your other revenue, the 5.3, pilots, rental income, tuition, etc. Then you subtract out your appropriate fund balance, including what you may take from reserves, the $5.1 billion, and you subtract your state aid at $13.4 million, and you arrive at your tax levy at $81,491,200. Simple as that. These have been our property tax increases over the number of years, and they've been consistently below 3%. And for this next year proposed, as you see, it's 0.37%, increasing tax levy about $300,000. As a percentage of total revenue, you see that actually has declined and now we're at about 77-78% of our total budget is the property tax revenue, and what's helping that is our increases in pilots and other revenue with state aid. And fortunate for homeowners, property owners in Hauppauge School District is the fact that unlike most every other school district that I know, 52.6% of the tax levy will be paid by commercial industry and not homeowners. That's unbelievable. Many school districts are nowhere near that. And I'll tell you, we were up in Albany and I was discussing with some of my colleagues that our pilot payments are about $4 million. And they're like, wow, we thought we received quite a bit of pilot payments, or pilot payments are $500,000. So we really, with the commercial base that we have in this district, we're so fortunate. We're able to do so much because, again, more than 50% is paid by commercial property tax owners. So let's take a quick look at the tax levy limit, which is not 2% for us. It's nowhere near 2% for us. And we'll go to the next slide. And Lisa, if you can just click on that, that will bring up just click on that link. That'll bring up the tax gap calculation. And this will be posted online. Members of the board, you do have this in your binder in the revenue tab. And what you do to get the tax levy, it is a bit complicated of a formula, and we did discuss that with members of our legislature and also members of the governor's staff last year. We start with this year's tax levy, which is $81,191,000. And then what you do is you multiply what they call a tax-based growth factor. And what tax-based growth factor is, it's assigned by the New York State Department of Taxation, and it accounts for any new building in your school district. Let's say a new shopping center went up, a new apartment complex went up, additions to the tax rolls. The minimum is 1, and anything above 1, obviously, in the case of the tax rolls have increased. Unfortunately, for the Hauppauge School District, we're at 1, we're at the minimum, it provides no benefit for next year. So you take that $81 million tax levy from this year, you multiply it by the 1, because we've had no growth in these tax rolls, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. And then what you do is you add in your pilot payments that you expect to receive this year. And what we expect to receive this year is $4.1 million. And again, this is our best estimate at this point in time. And then what you do is you subtract out your capital tax levy. Now, what's your capital tax levy? Your capital tax levy is all of your bond payments, all of your debt service, and it's what you expect to spend in the capital funds for that current year, which is not always directly related to the budget, but what you're going to spend in the capital fund, not the general fund, which we're talking about for that particular year. And for this year, it's $2.9 million. You take that sum there, and then you multiply it by the growth factor, which again is not 2% this year. It was 2%, I believe, the first year, only the first year. It's 1.62%, so we multiply that number by 1.26%. And then what we do is we subtract out the pilots we expect to receive for next year. So next year we expect the pilots to increase a bit, and we subtract out the $4.2 million. And then what you do is you add in your capital tax levy for next year. And you get your final number, which for us is $81,491,200, about $300,000 more than our current tax levy. Now, why is that the case? There's one big reason. You take a look at the capital tax levy here. It's $2.9 million at the top. And in the formula, you subtract that out before you add up 2%. And then you add in at the end capital tax levy for next year. That's only $2 million. So we're subtracting out $2.9 million, but we're only adding $2 million back in. That's the reason why our tax levy limit is where it is at 0.37%. Just X out of that and go to the next slide. Okay, again, it's not 2%. The multiplication factor is 1.62%, and it's that capital exclusion, which is much less. So we're subtracting out 2.9, and we're only adding 2. And why is this so different? 2 reasons. Remember I mentioned that we're getting about $240,000 in building aid for that one-time emergency roof project next year. We're going to receive it next year, not over 15 years. Well, when you do your capital exclusion, you add up all your debt service payments, you add what you're going to spend in construction of the capital fund, and then they make you subtract out what you're going to receive in building aid. So, fortunately, but unfortunately, we're receiving more building aid in a lump sum, so that came out of the total. So that $2 million that we added back in at the end, that's $250,000 less because of that additional building aid we're receiving. What's the other issue? The State Education Department has to review all building projects before they can go forward. The State Education Department issues us building permits for construction of towns have no jurisdiction, the county has no jurisdiction on our property. It's the state education department. I think now they're down to maybe 3 architects and 2 engineers reviewing projects for all 700 and some of the school districts in New York State. They are very, very behind. What happened is a number of projects were so behind about a year ago that they were delayed a year. They could not be completed in the summer of 2013. They were delayed to the summer of 2014. So in summer of 2014, we did the projects from 13 and the projects from 14 because of the delays. Now that we're caught up, we only have the projects from 15 to put in the capital exclusion. So our spending in construction is down. And again, that's why I mentioned that it's not always related to the general fund budget, because what we're spending in the capital fund is not what we raised that year. It's just what's been approved to proceed. Finally, what I wanted to mention is the governor's tax freeze plan. I believe everybody's received their checks by now. It's been around $200 or so. It was delayed in Suffolk County, probably in part because Suffolk County didn't vote for Governor Cuomo, and we also set tax levies much later than the rest of the state. But we did receive and did comply for year one, and all you needed to do to comply for year one was to be under the tax levy cap. So the check you got should have been the difference in the increase of taxes from last year to this year's school taxes. Now, to qualify for year two, the school district must remain in the tax cap as well, once again. But they need to submit, we need to submit by June 1st, Superintendent and I need to certify that plan, what's called a government efficiency plan. It would need to have a savings equal to 1%, equal to 1% of the 2014-15 tax levy, this year's tax levy, which would be almost $812,000. That savings must occur in 2016-17, 17-18, 18-19, in order to receive the rebate. And then you'll receive the rebate. The rebate will be issued next year. It will be what you received this year, plus what the difference in taxes are for next year. Because our tax levy is going up so slightly, that increase, checks will not most likely increase that much because of the 0.37% increase in the tax levy. This is something that we're looking at now. We had some discussions a few months ago about different ideas. We're looking at all aspects of the operation where we can document $812,000 worth of savings that are occurring for those 3 school years, and we'll be presenting more ideas moving forward. I'll tell you that the information that has come out about this has been very limited, and there really is no mechanism to even submit a plan right now to see if it will be approved or not. And Mr. Kylie and I were told in Albany, we're not sure when that will be put together so that we can submit a plan. I do mention next week is April, and these plans are due by June. So we are running a little bit out of time, but there's very few people working upstate right now. And there's, from what we're told, some discussion about how this is really going to happen, and that's holding up as well. So that is the conclusion of the first part of the presentation. This was the March 3rd presentation that we canceled due to snow. I can take questions at this section.
Do any board members have questions concerning the presentation thus far, Ms. Mess?
Everyone gets a tax rebate check?
People who qualify for STAR receive a tax rebate check. So you don't need to be registered for STAR, but you need to qualify for STAR, which means that you need to be a primary residence and whatnot. Even if your taxes were to go down, there is a calculation that they're doing that you would still receive a check as well, or increase in the levy. But it is just for property owners who are eligible for STAR. And there is, they just came out, if you do have any concerns about it, you can call the State Department of Taxation, and there is an appeal process. If you didn't receive a check, and you think you should have, or you think there was an error in your check.
Mr. Rito?
Mr. Chair, if the governor on his own in the business, if the governor gives more money than you're allocating, so right now it's 1.1, where does that go into? So all of a sudden he comes out and says 1.9. Where does the other point, almost?
Well, the governor is saying 1.1, the New York State Senate and is saying 1.9, and the Assembly is saying 1.8. So let's say it's closer to the 1.9. It depends on timing.
Okay.
But most likely, if it's within the time that we can make revisions to the budget, the superintendent will make a recommendation to the board about how to spend that money, that additional money that we expect to receive. By some off chance there's not an on-time budget and it comes in after the budget vote, let's say, the board still, based on the superintendent's recommendation, put together a plan. We probably would ask for a budget revision where the board can make changes after the budget vote. Thank you.
Any further questions, members of the board? I have a couple of questions. Concerning the tax freeze plan, year 2, $811,000 that we need to save. Is that over 3 years or that's per year?
Per year. Not cumulative, but per year. 812, 812, 812.
Okay. And what is meant by an efficiency plan in this context?
It is an interesting description by the Division of Budget. It's not necessarily savings, it's becoming more efficient. Demonstrating that we're doing things differently for a lower cost. I'll tell you an example. If we were to simply rent out to a new tenant, that may not be considered because that's increasing revenue. One of the things that we're looking at is we did reroute our buses this year. We are stopping at the same stops, but we're using 3 less buses. That's an efficiency. So there's a lot of ambiguity, and it's really going to be up to the Division of Budget. And that's why we're hoping that the portal will be open so we can send these things in and get some feedback. Paying off bonds is not considered being efficient. That's just considered making a prepayment, although that saves money. Closing a school building can be efficient, but not with regard to laying off members of the instructional staff. It's only the non-instructional staff. So there are a lot of caveats there.
Okay. And what happens after 18, 19? Do we can maintain that efficiency, or we can go back to being inefficient?
We can go back to being efficient as per the laws of 2014. There's no mention after that.
Any further questions from the board? Any questions from the community concerning the presentation thus far? Yes? Yeah, Mrs. Stephanie, you can use the microphone. Thank you.
So James, since you're trying to limit yourself to 4 bad Irish jokes, I'll limit myself to 4 more and questions tonight. But 3 of them are coming right now. First off, you mentioned with building aid that we're going to get $260,000 for that emergency roof project. In 15 and 16. Did we already spend the roof project money, and therefore does that mean we have an excess in aid for 15 and 16 over the expenditures that we'll have, that will obviously not repeat the following year?
You can tell Mrs. Stephanie's on the audit committee to answer this question. Yes, the expenditure was already made. It was made this summer. What the board did at the time is they did a budget revision and increased the budget by the amount that was needed to perform the roof work, which is a little over $900,000, and then they appropriated additional fund balance that was available to pay for that. Now, 2 things have happened. We've completed the project. Number 1, we're receiving, surprisingly, through due diligence of the Buildings and Grounds Department and the Business Office, receiving half a payment, insurance payment based on that. So we're receiving $400 and change back from our insurance company because they believe that storm is the reason why the roof failed and not the age of the particular roof. So we're receiving that money back. You'll see that as extra money left over this year because we received that payment. And yes, this building aid is coming in next year. That expenditure has already happened. So it's like, at this point, a one-time revenue source. It'll be here next year. It's $240,000. I misspoke. It'll be here next year, but it won't be here the year after that.
And you mentioned the increase in BOCES aid, which is about 36% of what we're actually going to increase in our spending. What are the factors that cause us to increase our BOCES spending by $300,000?
Well, as members of the board will remember, and I believe you'll remember past budget cycles, we've talked about moving different items to BOCES, making purchases through BOCES. We purchased some iPads through BOCES. We've purchased, each year we've purchased some servers and doing wiring through some stuff at BOCES. We've tacked on to many of their projects, and what that has done, and the more you spend with BOCES, obviously the more aid you'll get back. So we're really trying to use their services, number 1, to be efficient, but number 2, to really capitalize on this aid that we get back.
And
Finally-
not only services, but we use their vendors so that we know we have aid coming back in that regard. And we did something with our copiers that was pretty significant this year.
Yes, and as mentioned a little on, but yes, we have a copier contract with Xerox that expired this past August. Instead of negotiating a deal directly with Xerox, which was $250,000, we used the use of BOCES to contract in their bid to contract with Xerox, and therefore we're paying BOCES less than actually $250,000 because they have a better price, and we're getting building aid now on all those copiers that we were.
So not only getting a lower rate, it's almost like getting a rebate back for.
Absolutely, yes.
And finally, you showed on the chart there that the commercial base is paying over 50% of our taxes. But I think you've mentioned in the past that the commercial base percentage is decreasing. Just give us an idea of how much that has decreased over time.
Greg, that's an excellent question. It has been decreasing slightly. Now it's 52.6%. It was a couple years ago. It was probably a little less than 55%. So it's slowly edging down. Although based on the tax levy of $81 million, that does cause a swing. Why is it decreasing? And I believe all taxpayers realize that although our tax levy this year went up about 2.3%, your tax bills probably said there was a 5% increase, and that was because of the decrease in the commercial assessed value. And I've been doing some research as to why. One of the reasons are commercial properties are much more aggressive than tax certiorari's. The hotel filed a major tax certiorari, the golf courses, we have 3 golf courses, they also filed major tax certiorari's, and that's revenue taxes. And there were settlements made with the towns because towns have incentive to over-assess properties and then make settlements. So there's a settlement made, and that's part of it, those big tax certiorari's. But also, as I mentioned, we received double the amount of pilots this year than we have received in many years. We've been receiving about $500,000 from ISA properties for many years, and now we're receiving $1 million. These IDAs, these agreements, they're removing these properties from tax rolls. When you get a pilot, the whole value of that property comes off the tax roll. And then they make that pilot payment based on year 1, they'll pay 50% of what the taxes would have been, year 2, 55, and 60 until they're at 100%. So the more pilots that there are, the more properties that are being removed from tax rolls. Now, fortunately, we're receiving that extra money, and next year we're able to increase our pilot budget, and that's what's helping keeping the tax levy low and helping offset what the increase was this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any community members have other questions concerning the presentation thus far? Thank you. Moving to part 2, which is the budget concerning general support and employee benefits.
Well, everybody liked the first part so much, everybody's staying for the sequel. Very much. Very sad if people start to walk out. Why should you not hire a 4-leaf clover? Because you don't want to press your luck. Kind of like what I'm doing with you guys right now. So we'll take a look at general support. General support is the foundation. And I was oblivious to this.
Notice all the green he's wearing?
Yeah, I noticed that.
We came back from 2 days in Albany, and then I was in budget in my head, and I was totally oblivious of what the thing was. I don't feel agree. But general support is our infrastructure, our back office operations. It comprises about 12% of our overall expenditure budget, and it has for the past several years. And we'll take a look at what comprises the general support budget. It's the Board of Education expenses, district clerk, district meetings, superintendent, business office, the auditors, the treasurers, fiscal agents, our legal services, personnel, public information. And then here I have 2 in blue. Operational plant, which is almost 44% of the general support budget, and maintenance of plant, which is a little over 17% of the budget. That's a preponderance of general support, buildings and grounds, keeping our driveways and parking lots plowed, keeping our heat on, keeping our buildings in good working order, keeping our buildings clean, all of our security. That's most of general support. 10.3% is data processing. Then we have your insurance fees, school dues, judgments and claims, property loss, and postage administration. That comprises general support. And these just have been the increases of general support over the past number of years. And general support is slated to increase about 3.2%. And the preponderance of this increase is that copier contract, which was moved into general support because that's where that particular BOCES item is paid from. We'll start with we'll go through each function, increasing a whopping $106 for expenses related to the Board of Education. This is postage, communication supplies, any conference and travel expenses that the board may have. And I do want to note that the Board of Education receives no salary. To those of you who are waiting for a check, it's not coming. But this is increasing less than 1% for next year. Next two functions we'll take together. This is the office of the district clerk's salary, all of those items that are related to the district clerk's office, as well as district meetings, which is really our annual district meeting, which is our budget vote. And this is an important difference for next year. We have been using the lever machines, as you will recall, each and every year, lever machines that we've been using since the 60s, while the general election has moved, and many other, the library votes and such, they go to the optical machines. The governor has been, legislature's been passing, the governor's been signing extensions to use the lever machines, although not allowed to be used in general elections, has been authorizing to be used in school districts to help defray costs. The governor signed the bill last year, extending once again, but he has said, and gone on the record when he did sign this, that this will not be renewed after this law expires in December 2015. So after December 2015, unless something changes, unless the governor has a change of heart, which he generally does not have, we will need to go to the optical scan machines, and there is more of an expense with this. We need to work with the Board of Elections. We need to have somebody from the Board of Elections here during the vote, and we also need to use their printers to print the ballots that will work in those machines. So that's why you will see an increase here, because we are anticipating that change to be happening. And again, this all stemmed from 2000, the presidential election, the federal government telling all of us that we needed to change the way we vote. We'll take a move to the next item, and that's the chief school administrator budget. This is actually decreasing by 0.34%, but it's the salary for our chief school administrator, clerk salaries for that particular office, and any expenses related to that, conference and travel, dues and participation, postage supplies, etc. We'll take a look next is the business office, business administration. There's salaries for the entire business office, myself, the accountant, clerk, typist that work in the business office, the purchasing agent, as well as the two clerks that work in the duplicating office, as well as all conference and travel, dues and participation. There's money for a district-wide physical appraisal, which has been recommended to us by our auditors. Contractual services and BOCES costs. We subscribe to a service with BOCES called State Aid Planning. They help us plan our state aid each and every year, interpret what we're getting, our flex benefits program, and our cooperative purchasing program as well. And this particular budget is decreasing as well by about $16,000 for next year. And we'll take the next group together. It's our auditors, our district treasurer, our fiscal agent. These are fees for our auditors. We are required by law currently to have 3 different auditors. An independent auditor who audits our financial statements each and every summer after the fiscal year closes in June. We have an internal auditor who does an annual risk assessment for the school district, and then with the advice of the recommendation, the audit committee chooses one particular area to really dive into to do a review. This current year they're looking at our payroll system. And then also what's called a claims auditor. This auditor takes a look at each and every check and wire before it leaves this building. The check cannot leave this building unless it is signed off by a claims auditor, making sure that all laws have been adhered to and all board policies as well. There's the fees for our part-time treasurer, and this is an important note that our treasurer is part-time. He works about 5 or so hours a week here in the Hauppauge School District. He was once an independent contractor, but the comptroller has come down and said the treasurer must be a direct employee, and so he is an employee as 5 hours at this point in time. And then there's fees for our fiscal advisor who helps us prepare the borrowing documents for when we do a TAN borrowing, tax anticipation note, or if we were to sell bonds for capital construction, they would help us with all of those required statements for the sale. We'll take a look at legal services, and this is our retainers for our general counsel, as well as our labor counsel and our bond counsel. Our bond counsel is used for when we're doing borrowings for bonds or tax anticipation note sale. There's also additional funds for non-retainer matters, such as litigation or employee discipline. And it's important to note that 4 of the 5 bargaining agreements in the Hauppauge School District expired last June 30, 2014. We're currently in negotiations with those 4 groups. And the remaining agreement expires this June 30, 2015. We'll look at 1430, which is also decreasing about 0.21%. This is the personnel administration, all expenses associated with the personnel office, the assistant superintendent personnel, as well as the 3 clerical staff members, and covers all costs associated with that office, including the contractual costs, our online application system, our online substitute system, the advertising, and our employee assistance program, which is provided through specific BOCES. Public information, these are the expenses related to the printing of our monthly newsletters and budget brochures, as well as postage, supplies, and also, it's not up here, is our retainer for CJ2, which is our public relations firm that we contract with. That's in 1480. So if you take a look at all of this first group together, from Board of Education through public information, you see that we've kept it fairly steady and actually almost a bit decreasing over the years and for 15, 16. Next is the big one, is the operational plan. It's almost 44% of the general support budget. And there is the salary for the assistant plant facilities administrator, our security supervisor, our 45.5 custodians, our 19 security guards, and any overtime that might be associated with that. Money to pay our utility bills, cartage. We do not receive free garbage service in the Hauppauge School District. No private business or commercial entity does, or government, we do need to pay for that service. Contractual services, equipment service repair, supply, custodial supplies, cleaners, uniforms. There's conference and travel money, due some participation, postage, and supplies. This budget proposal also includes a recommendation for an additional half-time security guards, so that would bring us up to 19.5. And Mrs. Spear and I have already been talking about reworking more shifts, and the intention is that there will be a full-time security guard at Hauppauge Middle School next year. There will be district patrols at the elementary schools in Whippoorwill, and there will be guards at the high school as well. And the budget for operational plan is increasing slightly. It's increasing about $19,000 or 0.32% for next year. We'll take a look at our maintenance budget, and it has the salaries of all of our maintenance mechanics. There are 10. Our auto mechanic, there's 1. Our groundskeepers, which there are 6. Our groundskeepers are the ones who plow all of our parking lots in Salem, and sometimes work 36 hours straight doing so, especially this winter. There is money for 1 clerical that works in the Buildings and Grounds office and any associated overtime. In this code, we also have funds for building repair contracts, and we'll bring in vendors to help perform repairs, construction projects, minor construction projects in our buildings, as well as equipment repair. If there needs to be a repair to a chiller or refrigeration that the vendor is required. There are trade supplies in there, painting supplies, ground supplies, glass, etc. Hardware is in this budget. Money for uniforms, there's money for fuel, auto parts, and again, conference and travel dues and postage and supplies. This budget does include the purchase of a new security vehicle. It's in the equipment line 2010. The vehicle will look identical to the white Jeep Patriot that's outside. It was bought on government contract. Those funds are included in the budget for that vehicle to purchase next year. And 1621, the maintenance of plant, is actually decreasing by 0.15%, decreasing by about $3,600. Data processing is 1680. It's the next area. There has been an increase in this area. And the reason why this particular budget line has increased is related to BOCES and related to those copiers. We added about $215,000 to this budget for the copier contract. But in here, data processing salaries, money for customization of applications, the BOCES services, which include regional information, core BTS, our internet service, our lease payments. As the board will recall, we have entered into lease agreements with some BOCES for servers and iPads, etc. Those payments are paid from this particular line, as well as our social media and public relations specialists. Data this is also where the funds for our unfunded or mandate to do data reporting, our unfunded mandate, those funds come from here to do all that reporting to level 0 and to the state of New York. And 1680, that increase is increasing about $338,000, and that's related in most to moving that copier money in there. Previously, the copier money was sprinkled throughout the budget, and it has all been put there. And that's preponderance of that increase. Take a look at property and casualty insurance, 1910. These are the premiums for all of the district's insurance policies, as well as funds to ensure to satisfy the district's self-insured retention. And that's basically our deductible. To receive lower rates, we retain, or we have self-insured retention. So that would mean on a property claim, of the first $10,000 of the property claim, we will pay out of pocket. That helps keep our premium low. For legal liability, that's $25,000. The first $25,000 of loss we will pay. And that does keep the premiums lower than they would be if it was at 100%. And then because of that, we are required by insurance companies to have a claims adjuster. Let's say there's a minor car accident or whatnot with the district vehicle. Our claims adjuster investigates and reports to the insurance company and tries to facilitate any kind of settlements that may be necessary. This particular line is increasing a little less than 8% just due to the general insurance market at this point in time. Move on to the next. The school association dues are dues for the New York State School Boards Association, National Suffolk School Boards Association scope, and if there are any fees with regard to the ISLIP School Boards Association as well, that would be in this particular budget. It's increasing only about $500 for next year. The next two lines are not increasing at all. These are judgment claims, funds to satisfy minor legal judgments and claims against the district, and also funds to satisfy a contractual property loss claim. In each of our collective bargaining agreements, if a staff member has an item that is damaged due to some kind of malicious act, they're entitled to a small reimbursement. I believe it's capped at each bargaining unit, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 for the entire unit. That would be paid out of the year as well, but there are no changes in this particular budget. And we'll take a look at the last item, and that's BOCES administration costs, and this is actually decreasing about $600. Eastern Suffolk BOCES has made a concerted effort to lower and actually try to decrease their costs, and what this is the costs related to BOCES administration, as well as any of their facility costs, their rental costs. It's important to note about Eastern Suffolk BOCES as well. If Eastern Suffolk BOCES does have any fund balance left over at the end of the year, they are required to cut a check to the school district to divvy up that fund balance among all their component school districts. And that's with the $600 decrease. So that is the conclusion of general support. And I'll turn over to any questions.
Do any board members have any questions concerning general support? Any community members have any questions concerning the general support presentation? Stephanie.
My apologies for being an accountant. You mentioned quickly with the legal expenses that the legal retainer went up 15%, and then our additional legal services went up almost by 12%. Is the legal retainer, this is the first time we've increased the budget for legal retainer? And secondly, you said that you mentioned the 4 contracts that have already expired, the 5th one that's due to expire. Is this a one-time increase, and we should see a reduction in the future after these contracts are negotiated?
Actually, the increases took effect this year, but the budget changes are for next year. Our additional legal services will start with that. The district has had an increase in additional legal costs due to a number of litigation matters. It's just, it's where all municipalities are at this point in time. We're constantly defending matters that are brought before us, and there's really not a way to lower that particular line. As regard to the retainers, we are in negotiations with all groups. Generally, how it works with labor retainers is we do pay the same amount. These contracts do take a number of years to settle. Generally, what the firms do is they will charge the same amount each year, and therefore you don't have a year when you have 4 contracts that are expired that your rates spike. So we kind of level it out over time so that it doesn't affect the budget. Where one year you'll pay 0, and the next year you'll pay $100,000. That's 100% increase in the budget.
So we should expect
To remain consistent. Yes. Okay.
Any further questions from the community about the presentation thus far? Thank you. Moving on to employee benefits.
Anybody know why you get what you get when you cross poison ivy with 4-leaf clover?
What?
A rash and good luck. And we'll speak about health benefits and such. If we can go to employee benefits, and we'll start with the employees retirement system, and you'll see here a breakdown. We have 233 members of the New York State Employees Retirement System. These are our non-instructional staff members, our clerical, our custodians, our security people, our monitors, etc. It is mandatory under the laws of the state of New York that all full-time employees be a part of the retirement system. It's not an option, it is required. Part-timers have the option if they want to be in the plan or not. Most do choose because it's really advantageous to be a part of the plan. This is the breakdown, and we have 3 people in Tier 1 and only 2 people in Tier 2. The preponderance of 181 are in Tier 4. But what's very important to note is there's 28 people now in Tier 6. Tier 6 came about 2 years ago, and this number is 3 times the amount that it was last year. So we are starting to see more and more Tier 6, and the cost associated with Tier 6 is much lower, as you see when we put the rates there. All the rates are decreasing, but for example, next year we took this to pay 25% in payroll for a Tier 1 person. For a Tier 6 person, we expect to pay 10.5% of payroll. So it's a huge difference between the lower tiers and the higher tiers. Tier 5 is 15.4, Tier 6 is 10.5, Tier 1 is 25, Tier 2 is 23. And that's percent of payroll. So if somebody's making $100,000, for example, then 25% would be $25,000. Although the contribution rates have increased for the past 2 years with this, it's not necessarily indicative of the future. This is all based on Wall Street, but things do look like they continue to be at least stable and not increase significantly in the future. And again, this is the employee contribution, the budget for the employee retirement system. You can see in 9-10, right after the fiscal crisis in 2008, right after everything hit, the ERS rate has increased significantly, kept increasing, and now this is the second year that we are going there. Take a look at the teacher's retirement system. The teacher's retirement system is about a year behind the employee's retirement system. The employee's retirement system is increasing for about 2 years. This is the first year we expect the teacher's retirement system to decrease, and this is very telling. Of our 625 employees, 91 are in Tier 6. Last year, it was about 20. So we will see the benefits of Tier 6. Now, unlike the previous retirement system, there's one rate for everybody, but as we have more people with the lower benefit levels, these rates will go down. And this is really significant. This is what is balancing the budget for next year, given that we have such a low tax levy limit. For 2014-15, this year, we're paying 17.53% of salary to the retirement system. It's decreasing to 13.26%. That's a 1.6 million plus reduction in costs. And that is funding the budget because we have such a low tax levy limit. It's the first decrease that we've seen since the crisis. It's not necessarily indicative of future years, but based on what we see, we believe that the rates will be stabilized and not it will continue to decrease. And again, this is our budget, and you see we spiked in 14-15 with the highest rates that we've had, over $8 million, and now we're decreasing, and that budget is much less than it has. Now we're at $6.4 million, and for a total increase of over $1.8 million over this current year's budget. And this is just the employee contribution rate, and as bad as things were at 17.56% this year, it was worse. And if you look back in the 80s, you'll see that we had an employee contribution rate of about 23% of payroll. And this is for our teaching staff, our instructional staff, our administrators, our teaching assistants. We were very fortunate around 2000 or so, when the economy was really booming. We saw rates fractions of a percent. I don't think we'll ever get back there. I think the retirement board sees that was a bit short-sighted, because then we had a dramatic increase. It's always easy when the rate comes down. When the rate goes back up, it really causes havoc. You saw that since this whole economic crisis hit. But it looks like we are seeing a bit of a downturn in this rate. We'll take a look at Social Security, or Social Security budget. This is FICA. We all love to pay in our checks, but also the school district must pay its matching contribution. Social Security budget is going to increase by about $61,000. We are required to contribute 7.65% of every employee's salary to Social Security with a cap of $118,500. So on the first $118,500 of salary, we pay 7.65%. If the salary is higher than that, we stop paying the full amount. After $118,500, we only pay 1.45%, which is the Medicare contribution, the Medicare portion of that, for anything above. Historically, the salary maximum increases every year, every January 1st, which would thereby increase the amount we pay. If it goes up to 120, we pay just that much more. We'll pay 7.65% more than $1,500. Social Security costs are driven by salary increases. So salaries increase, the ceiling increases, so does our costs to Social Security. And you'll see again, we're going up about $61,000 in the budget for next year. We'll take a look at workers' compensation. District is self-funded for workers' compensation. That means we are our own insurance company for these particular claims. It would be very cost prohibitive for an entity of this nature, this size, to actually receive traditional insurance where we were covered by an insurance company. It would be so cost prohibitive. So that means that the school district pays all of the medical bills, all of the hospitalization bills, and the restoration of lost wages as per law, workers' comp law, to employees. If there are any awards by the Workers' Compensation Board of permanent partial disability, let's say an employee is hurt and they've lost what they deem to be 10% use of their right arm, there's actually a value for that they have, and we would be required to pay that award to that employee. We can fund that either through the general fund budget or through one of our reserve funds. And for this fiscal year, past fiscal year, we had $790,000 in that reserve. What we do have, however, is we have co-insurance to protect us against any large catastrophic loss. So we are on the hook for every loss up to $500,000. If the loss exceeds $500,000, then we have an excess carrier, an insurance company, which will cover every dollar after $500,000. $500,000 is the number because it is very expensive insurance. It helps keep our costs low. And we have to reserve the $790,000, so we are adequately covered if there was some large loss. And this particular budget is actually, we're decreasing it a little based on claims that we have. This will fluctuate. There are years that maybe an employee will need a hip replacement, and that could be $100,000. Really spike up the budget in other years where there really aren't major medical procedures being performed. We'll take a look at life insurance. All of our collective bargaining agreements do provide for some form of life insurance for our employees, and this particular budget is increasing by about $868,000. If we look at the next slide for next year. Unemployment insurance is also decreasing. It's decreasing by about 27% for next year, and this is the funds we have to pay. Anybody who goes to the New York State Department of Labor and applies for unemployment. There is currently a maximum benefit of $420 per week, although there is in the legislation an escalator for future years, and you receive unemployment for 26 weeks. So we pay for the first 26 weeks. There was federal legislation which extended beyond the 26 weeks. That has still not been renewed, although the president is still on his agenda, but it has not been renewed. If that were to be the case, we would receive that money from the federal government. With regard to unemployment insurance, the administrative law judges are very, very liberal when deciding these cases. Almost everybody who does go for unemployment insurance, they have somewhat of a reason that they receive that. We do request hearings, and we lose most of them, but all in all, the expenses have been coming down in this area, and that's why we're able to reduce the budget by about $40,000 for next year. Take a look at the next slide. We'll see we haven't. We saw the spike there just, when GEA came in and we did have job reductions, we saw the spike in the insurance budget. But now we have had to let it go in this a number of budget cycles, so we're very fortunate for that. Disability insurance, all of our collective bargaining agreements do provide for disability insurance. It's a disability insurance plan that provides 66.66% of an employee's salary up to a maximum benefit of $6,500 per month. There is a 6-month waiting period for this particular plan that we do have, and this budget is really not increasing much at all for next year. Next, we'll talk about one of the largest areas of the teacher's retirement system in the budget is medical insurance. We have one main medical insurance plan. It's called the New York State Health Insurance Program, or more commonly referred to as the Empire Plan, with 531 enrollees. We have something called MediBlue. This is a Medicare gap insurance with free retirees on this plan. It's 100% paid by the retiree for that particular Medicare gap insurance. And then we have what's called the UPSU Medical Fund. Our members of the United Public Service Employees Union, our custodians, our security guards, our monitors, our non-instructional staff, with the exception of our clerical, they have benefits provided by the union. The union receives a set amount, negotiated amount per month per employee, and they go out and purchase health benefits for those particular employees. We have 116 employees that we contribute to the medical fund for a total of 650 enrollees. Now, as I said, we have 531 enrollees in NYSHA, the Empire Plan. This is a breakdown of the preponderance of people who are active employees in our family plan, which is the most costly premium for the school district. Take a look at the next slide. And this is just an example of where we were with the family premium cost. and it was $802 in 1980, and now we're over $20,000. It's important to note that this is the full premium price. All of our, most of our bargaining groups, just about everybody in the district contributes to their health plan, pays a percentage of that. These are the rate increases for the entire plan, and you'll see that the rates most recently have been all under 10%. They've been really hovering between 0 no increase and 6%. There was a nightmare time back in the early 80s where I remember Dr. Gavin telling me that he came in one day in January and got a note from Empire that the rate was going up 60%. Fortunately, that was an anomaly, and the health plan, civil service has really been working to keep this level as low as possible. Just important to note that most of our health insurance money is spent on active employees. About 70% of the budget's for active employees, and about 30% is to provide for retiree benefits. Dental insurance, we are self-funded for dental. That means we pay all of the claims we receive based on a schedule of procedures. So we have a schedule through our third-party administrator, and for root canal, we pay X number of dollars. It's not associated with what a particular dentist may charge, it's associated with what we'll reimburse. So claims, as I mentioned, are reviewed by a third-party administrator that we do hire, and it is paid on our schedule. We pay 100% of an individual plan, and we pay 75% of the family plan. And this is a breakdown of 126 employees take individual dental and 263 family dental. As per collective bargaining agreements, employees may decline health insurance, and there are set payments in those bargaining agreements. If such an employee were to decline providing a cost savings to the district, that means that they have a spouse or such that is providing them health insurance. It's important to note that we had a plan that paid for medical reimbursements, that reimbursed employees for their co-payments. It was called the wraparound plan. This was eliminated for all active employees, and retirees will keep the plan until 65. This is a budgetary savings of about $265,000 by eliminating this plan. Also, there are funds budgeted for compliance with the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. If we were, based on the current 30-hour rule per week, needed to provide insurance to an employee that did not otherwise have, there are funds budgeted for that, as well as because of the complexities of this law and the requirements that we provide tax returns, health benefit tax returns starting in 2016, we did need to hire, as the board is aware, a third-party consultant to help us navigate these and help us do the analysis. So funds for that third party are in there as well. Overall, this particular budget is increasing about 4.3% for next year. And this again, as I showed with state aid, employee benefits do, and this is with every entity, public, private, nonprofit, governmental. Employee benefits are becoming a larger and larger proportion of budgets. Back in 1995-96, it was about 15% of the overall budget, and now it's about 24% in 15-16. We have other benefits in that particular area, which has not changed in the budget for next year. It's at the same level. Retirement payouts, as I mentioned, we employ the benefit for liability reserve that helps fund payments for employees who retire that have unused sick days as per their collective bargaining agreement. Sometimes they receive payments, and these payments are made out of a special line and is funded by the reserve, possibly. Other employee benefits paid for unused vacation days, if a particular contract called for that would come out of this area, or the contract reimbursements, as well as funds to contribute to a non-elective, contribute to employees for rebate for non-elective contribution. As I mentioned, I'll use our teachers for an example. They do receive some payment for unused sick days, and the first portion of that is paid through this non-elective employer contribution to their full rebates. It's non-elective, so it cannot be changed. By then, they cannot take the cash payment. Anything that's remaining would be paid out on the top line there as a retirement payment. And again, there's no change in that particular line. And you'll see that this other benefit line has been very, very static over time. Finally, tonight, in our 10 minutes, we have community service support. This is our swim budget. We'll just take a look. It's our swim program. We provide community, non-community members access to the district's pool for a fee. We provide swim instructors and lifeguards. We have family swim. At times we have offered Zumba. and that's all over the pool, and we have a $98,000 budget. For that, it's less than 21% of the particular budget to run the swim program. We do have corresponding income. I talked about other revenue. The swim program is other revenue. Swim program is self-sustaining, so taxpayer dollars are not spent to provide these programs because we do charge for these services and we do charge enough to cover our expenses. And you'll see that the budget is at $98,000 and has been for some time. That concludes my formal presentation. I hope everybody comes back next week for our final installment.
Any questions from the board concerning this last two parts here? Ms. Mass?
Are we still getting rental from one of the other high schools for our pool?
Yes, we are. Smithtown High School does rent our pool for the use of their swim team. They come in the mornings, and it's been very positive. They pay $10,000 to use the pool. They only use it for their practices and just one meet that they have. Their other meets are at other places. And it doesn't interfere with any of our programs. We already have staff there. A pool is such that whether people are in it or not, it needs to be maintained. We need somebody checking the levels. It's for the Department of Health every couple of hours. So the more we can get it, have people use it and get people in the pool, the better for us.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Mr. Scarito?
Mr. Stuccio, my numbers make sense. We have about 858 employees. Does that make sense?
Well, that includes all part-timers, substitute teachers, swim instructors. It includes the gamut, so it's not 800 full-time people. There's a lot of call-in people. Maybe there's a call-in custodian, or all of our subs, our entire sub list. That would be what comprises that number.
So James, when you talked about the tier 6 teachers, many of them are substitute teachers, correct?
Most are people new to the system, which would be new hires or substitutes, call-ins.
Any further questions from the board concerning this section? Ms. Mass?
How many of our
Could you use your microphone, please?
new hires are probationary?
How many of the new hires are probationary?
You mean this year?
Yeah. You heard me, Judy?
Teacher. Did you talk about teachers?
Teacher what?
Yeah, it's probably about, I think it's like 16 probationary teachers.
That we
Years
hired
1 through 3. We're in their first, second, or third year.
that are in their first, second, or third year. Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? I have a couple. Mr. Stuccio, the percentage of our total budget that employee benefits make up goes up year over year, correct?
It has not. It's been hovering around that 24-25% range for some time. The illustration that I showed is many years ago. It comprised less, and what's fueling that is pension contributions and health insurance, which has increased exponentially for everyone.
Do you see that trending up continually? Do you see it getting flat? I mean, just between 2001 and today, you're talking about 80% jump.
I see that stabilizing, if not starting to decrease, and that's because of the employee contribution rates. TRS dropped over 25%, savings of $1.8 million. So as far as that driver, I think we're going to see pension contribution rates stabilize. Health is the big question. Family plan increased a little over 5% this year. Last year, it only increased about 1.6%. That's been a little bit more volatile. I think as the federal law takes effect, we'll see if that will really change costs much more than it has already, because it has been driving premiums. Also, the support cases out there that don't change everything. But I'm expecting it to stabilize at the 24-25% where we are now. I'm not expecting it to increase, especially since the board is working so hard to negotiate higher contributions from all of its partner units.
Concerning TRS, our TRS cost is completely non-discretionary, right? We get a bill and we have to pay it.
You must pay, well, you don't even pay it because they deduct it from your first 3 state aid payments. So we don't even need to write a check. And it's important to note that full-time staff must be members, and part-time staff have the option, most of them do take it, to call in subs. Why wouldn't they? And we have no choice over that. They have the option, and if they choose to be a part of TRS, or they chose to be part of TRS in another district a couple years ago, then we have to contribute for them as well.
Okay. So between TRS and the other items that make up the employee benefits section, with the Triborough Amendment and the state law requirements, is there anything in there, in this section of the budget, that we can control unilaterally? So specifically as to the medical costs, which I think make up the biggest chunk of what we're talking about, absent givebacks from any of our unions, that will continue to rise.
Even if we wanted to change the health plan, we'd have to collectively bargain that. So yes, we have no control over this. And in civil service alone runs the health plan, and they determine what the rate increases will be. We have no input or control over that.
Is there, Mr. Richmond, is there any relief coming in this regard?
Not that I'm aware of.
And James, the percentage of the budget, we talked about employee benefits, but the percentage of the budget in employee salaries, what is that?
Salaries and benefits generally comprise between 70 and 80% of the budget. So
Just between 70 and 80 million out of our 105, roughly?
for benefits and salaries.
Yes.
Correct.
Is that trending up, down, not at all?
That's being affected more so by the changes in health and ERS. I'll tell you it's the same for each and every district. School districts are employee-centered kind of organizations. We're not a product-based thing, so we're people, and at that cost. So I see it trending up only slightly because of the benefits cost, but that does seem to be stabilizing. And in all, it has remained between 70 and 80% of our total school budget.
Okay, to the extent, and again, the Triborough and these other state laws, we cannot do anything unilaterally to affect that number.
Correct. Most of your budget is non-discretionary.
Well, 100% of it is in relation to employee
Yes,
benefits and
correct.
salary.
Yes.
It's a bill that we have to pay every year absent
There's
some
no
kind of
control.
movement in collective bargaining
Absolutely.
or relief from the state.
There is no plans, and Mr. Kelly can tell you as well, there's no way to talk about any kind of change.
Any further questions from the board concerning this? Any questions from the community concerning this portion of the budget presentation, Mr. Stephanie? No?
I'm good, thanks. I usually have my foot.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Next week we'll be
I know how to
doing
reach outside of here,
the
so.
instruction budget, transportation, we'll discuss capital projects, and the undistributed transfers to other funds.
Anyone else? No more questions concerning anything that we've discussed so far? Very good. Thank you, James. That was excellent. Moving to the superintendent's update and comments.
James and Lisa, I'd like to thank you both. Thank you for that. It was very clear, James, and much appreciated. I'd like to begin this evening just by saying a few words about Josephine Gallarella. As Mr. Barchet mentioned earlier, unfortunately, Josephine passed after 2 years of battling with cancer. She had just retired from our district as the Director of Fine and Performing Arts when she discovered her illness. All of us had high hopes. Everyone thought things were going well, but in true Josephine style, with grace and peace, she left us. For those who did not have the distinct pleasure of knowing this woman, she was one of the kindest, most positive people I've ever met, and certainly worked with. You know, people use the expression, the cup half full, the cup half empty. Josephine's cup was always more than half full. So we extend our condolences as a district to her husband, John, her children, nieces, nephews, extended family, and are just very thankful that she touched the lives of so many of not only the professionals in this district, but the young men and women who came through the Fine and Performing Arts program. And indeed beyond that. She was extraordinary, so we will miss her. And I also want to, on behalf of the district, extend condolences to Lillian Carey, who's our Director of Languages Others than English. Unfortunately, she lost her husband a week and a half ago, also to cancer, and he too battled for a number of years, dealing with the cancer. It's remarkable to me that Lillian was here just 4 or 5 weeks ago, doing a presentation for the board about our FLES program when she had so many other things on her plate. And as you all saw, you never would have known. She's a true professional, and we will support her any way she needs, but we extend our condolences to her and her family as well. That being said, there are positive things that are going on here in the district, many of them, and in the next few months, you will see recognized here at a board meeting our middle school and high school students who had success in the Long Island History Fair. We had DECA students who were very successful at the New York State competition. They went beyond Long Island and placed in the state. Our kick line, although having a little bit difficult time traveling to Florida because of a snowstorm, competed for the first time at a national level and placed 7th in their division nationally, which was wonderful for them and very exciting. I also want to comment on students at the high school who participate in a new club this year called the Mock Trial Club, and it is a marvelous experience for those who are interested potentially in the legal field someday. I watched our high school students compete against the Kings Park team in their very first competition, and they literally have a script, they have to study it, they have to do their background checks and information and create their cross-examinations and the like, and they actually participate in a trial against one another with a judge, a non-partial person who's not from either district. And although our students came out a little bit on the short end, just by a couple of points, they did a fabulous job. And I'm just grateful that it's a club that has come back. This district had it years ago, and it disappeared. But we now have 2 teachers at the high school willing to work with our students who have such a great interest in this. A couple of quick reminders for the community. The Harlem Wizards will be back in Hauppauge. It's a Forest Brook fundraiser, and that will be Saturday evening at the high school gymnasium beginning at 6 p.m. if you're interested in really a fun time. And watching the Wizards actually make fun of all of the professional staff who try and compete against them. Also, and I'm really hopeful that we will have a good representation from our community at Unite for the Fight, which is being held on the 30th of March from 7 to 9 p.m. in our high school auditorium. It is being sponsored by the Islip School Chief Superintendents, and each district, each of the, I think, 11 component districts have committed to bringing staff, PTA, board, administrators to this program. It is designed to be an educational program for all about the drug epidemic that our children are facing. Not only to deal with the medical issues involved, but the legal issues involved. There will be a parent and a child there who have had experiences that have been difficult, and most importantly, the auditorium will be filled with at least 40 vendors, and not vendors in the aspect of selling you something. It will be representatives from various social services, mental health agencies, police departments. They're there to try and support parents and kids in dealing with the issue. Some of them will have free giveaways. Some of them will just have the information to give people if they need a resource. So if you know anybody who might have an interest in this or need to reach out, or dealing with something like this in their own lives, I would really encourage you to come. Again, it's going to be on the 30th of this month from 7 to 9 p.m. I had the distinct pleasure yesterday, along with Mr. Eschbach, of being asked to chaperone a senior year trip to the 9/11 Museum in Manhattan. We took students from our participation in government class. If you have not been, it was my first time. It's an extraordinarily moving, compelling museum. But what really was special to me were a number of things. One, the seriousness with which our students dealt with the whole experience, their empathy and their understanding in terms of the museum. It's a phenomenal place. You can hear a pin drop. And I think it's because of what people experience as they're there. But it has been so powerful this past year that we will now be making it a senior year experience for all of our students to go to the 9/11 Museum. And they will do that either in their participation in government class, or some of our AP students will do it because that's where they are their senior year. So, for all of your information, I think that our programs continue to grow, and they continue to grow in depth, and they continue to, I believe, support for our kids that very important area of social emotional literacy. I know that James mentioned that he and Mr. Kiley went to an advocacy weekend sponsored by the New York State School Boards this past weekend. I'm sure Mr. Kiley will speak about that in a little while. I wanted to say a few words about the advocacy efforts that I participated in the weekend before through the New York State Council of School Superintendents. During that conference, we had the ability to meet with Merrill Tisch, who is the Chancellor of the Board of Regents. And it is the first time that I have heard her publicly apologize to a group about the rollout of the Common Core, how it occurred, and the haste with which it was done. And to indicate that, she didn't use the phrase hindsight is 20/20, but essentially, if they could revisit some of what had been done, they would certainly be doing things differently. She also did speak about rigor, flexibility, and the future. And when she talked about rigor, that's something that I think all of us agree that we strive for in our schools. But when she talked about flexibility, I again was proud of the Hauppauge schools, because one of the things that the board will be talking about, in addition to the additional pathways to graduation, which I've spoken of here in the past, and offering students that fifth regents in another area other than 2 social studies, she talked about incentivizing for districts' higher level coursework, and specifically she referenced IB and AP. And if indeed they ever do incentivize that kind of a thing, I think we're well poised. James may be happy if they incentivize it monetarily, but also to be able to incentivize collaboration with BOCES to establish programs like this and more programs of rigor for kids. And she also did speak about diplomas with designations so that we can support our kids who do take alternative pathways. I want to mention the things that very briefly, that the New York State School Superintendents lobbied for. One of the things that the superintendents really tried to do is to limit the numbers of items that they present during lobbying efforts to their legislators, because if you go in with a laundry list of 10, 15 items, it tends to be diluted, and you don't have a lot of opportunity to get anywhere on any one item. So certainly, the top item was to end the GEA. and to rebuild operating aid. As James referenced, there are districts throughout this state who would be much more inclined to support the restoration of foundation aid because it would benefit them certainly more than the GEA. However, it is nice to know that the restoration of GEA in my career is the first universal fiscal issue around which over 700 superintendents can coalesce, because they do recognize that that restoration is important. When we met with Senator Flanagan, and he indicated to us that although the mission for him and the Senate Republicans, who you know have been our friends in terms of financing education, he, a year ago, pledged that in 2 years the GEA would be restored. This year, he said, it may be a 3-year process. But I still do know, as James mentioned, that our Senate is pushing for a far higher number than our governor is presenting to us in terms of GEA and the restoration of the aid. The teacher evaluation system and APPR is a huge lobbying effort for the superintendents. And it is in that there is a belief that the purpose of evaluating our teachers is to improve teaching and to improve school leadership, because as you know, our principals are evaluated as well using an APPR. And to use 50% of a teacher's evaluation based upon a test score clearly places too high an emphasis for us on student test scores in terms of evaluating our teachers. So the governor has also proposed using independent evaluators to come into districts to provide some support, especially if there are districts that have too many highly qualified teachers. I should say effective teachers, highly effective and effective teachers. That, to me and to the superintendents, is just the next huge unfunded mandate coming down the pike. Who is going to pay for the independent evaluators? Who are the people going to be? How do they know anything that's going on in our school system, from whence we came and where we plan to go? So we are adamantly opposed to that proposal by the governor. I do have to say, and I'm sure Jim and Jim experienced the same thing, it's pretty widely understood that what the governor put out there was draconian in nature. And his goal is to pull it back a little so he can say he listened, but still, from what we're hearing, the numbers are high. So maybe it won't be 50%, but maybe it'll be 40%. It still does not do away with the issue of the stress that you're placing on teachers and students in terms of these tests. So the other thing about the testing that we are advocating for is we should not be one of the few states that has our students participating in so many field tests, because the state education department is not given the adequate funding to develop a bank of test questions without the field testing. And so the other push that we're making is, you need to help us do away with the testing debacle by being the ones to fund the state education department appropriately so that they can have a large bank of test questions from which to draw, which is something that is clearly very necessary. So finally, the only other thing that I'd like to mention, and I believe most of you probably read the paper and understand that we have a number of new members of the Board of Regents. 2 veterans, Jim Dawson and Bob Bennett, had been on the board for many, many, many years. Well, the legislature has reappointed some of the regents, including our Roger Tillis, who represents Long Island and has been incredibly supportive of us. But they did not reappoint those 2 members, and then there were some retiring members. So it's an interesting, new, diverse board. it does include people who have been educators. It includes a retired superintendent. It includes a college-level educator. And I think that the legislature was attempting to send a message to the Board of Regents when they didn't bring back these two long-standing members. And they were good men, and they did a lot of good work. But the Common Core issue and some of the reactions of some of the members of the Board of Regents, I think, has led to this new board. So it will be interesting for us to see how and if there's any impact with that. It's anticipated that Meryl Tisch will maintain her position as chancellor for some time now. But it clearly was another discussion taking place because the hearings and the appointments actually were that lobby day we had up in Albany. And that's it. Thank you. Mr. Bourget just reminded me, thank you very much. There is an addition to the agenda, which we will be talking about later on under discussion matters. There is a document, and this really goes along with the lobbying effort, so I thank you, by a small group of people called the Alliance to Save Public Education, school and community leaders from across New York State. They put a letter together and sent it to local school superintendents and to university people, school board members, some union presidents. And really, the letter is designed to be delivered to our assembly people and our senators, and ultimately urge them to refrain from enacting the governor's proposals for change without any meaningful debate and discussion on his reform agenda. I did sign the letter and forwarded it back to this group, and later on I'll be asking the board if they have an interest in having Mr. Bourget as their representative, as the president of the board, sign the letter as well, voicing our concern and that we want careful, thoughtful debate on these issues before the next issue is pushed through without much thought and we have the next crisis, which is exactly what has happened with Common Core and APPR.
Thank you. Moving to the consent agenda, questions and comments from the community concerning tonight's agenda only. Just to note, there will be a section later on to ask anything at all concerning the district. Are there any questions concerning this agenda only? Moving to the consent agenda, are there any items that members would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Ms. Mass?
7.1B.
Thank you. Any further? Mr. Scarito?
7.18.
Any others? With that, I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda less all 7.1. Thank you. Mr. Fortmeyer, I will second discussion. Mr. Stuccio, the budget transfers that make up 7.3A, can you just give a very quick synopsis of those?
Budget transfer number 71. The first one is, as I mentioned, we are leasing our copiers through Eastern Suffolk Postage. We originally budgeted in a 4320 account code, which was a Xerox lease code. So that money is transferred to satisfy that lease. But the overall cost is lower. Budget transfer number 72. This is to pay additional legal invoices for the remainder of the year due to increased litigation, arbitrations, and employee discipline matters. Budget transfer number 73 is to pay for an increase in our legal retainers. As the board is aware, we did make a change to our legal services this past August. Budget transfer number 81, this was for professional development. Budget transfer number 82, this was for increased BOCES workshops and conferences. And budget 89 was an increase to the BOCES Arts and Ed account code, which provides programs in our schools, such as Holocaust program at the high school. Guest artists coming into elementaries, etc.
Thank you. Any further questions, any further discussion, I should say, on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving to the items that were removed, starting with 7.1A. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Discussion? I'm sorry, a second? Thank you, Mr. Fortmeyer. Discussion? Mr. Scarito?
Do we know the exact amount?
I don't have that on hand right now, but I can get it to you.
Any further discussion?
Oh, yes.
The comment was it was under 1,000. The answer was yes?
Yes.
Wonderful. Any further discussion on 7.1A? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving to 7.1B, which was severed by Ms. Mass. Do I have a motion? Thank you. I will second. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-1. That concludes the consent agenda. Moving to committee reports, policy committee, there was no action. The audit committee, Mr. Kiley, was there a meeting today?
We had a brief meeting to adopt the,
Please.
we had a brief meeting today before this meeting to adopt to present to the board the fiscal audit report.
Which was just accepted as part of the consent agenda, and just a note that that audit found had no findings, correct? It was completely positive?
Correct.
Thank you. Good job, James. The district steering committee, there was no meeting since our last meeting. At our last meeting, Ms. Chris updated the community concerning what happened at the prior meeting. The HIV/AIDS committee, Dr. Kraft, I believe you met at the end of February.
We met on February 26th, had the meeting over at the athletic director's office. Meeting went very well, very informative. And I believe he was going to forward minutes of the meeting to you. I don't know if you received it yet.
Not yet.
And, that'll be presented to the board.
Great. Is there another meeting planned for that this year?
No, I believe that it's once a year.
Very good. Okay. The Code of Conduct and Safety Committee, I believe there's been no action. Skipping advocacy for a moment. The Organizational Planning and Bond Committee, these are our two new committees. There's been no action. Going to the Advocacy Committee report, Mr. Kiley and Mr. Stuccio appeared and represented the district up in Albany this past weekend. Mr. Kiley or Mr. Stuccio and Mr. Stuccio, would you give us a report on what went on?
Yes, so as you know, James and I attended the Capitol Conference. We sat down with Senator Croce, Senator Flanagan, Assemblyman Fitzpatrick, and stated our concerns with some of the governor's proposals. Currently, he's holding the state aid hostage if the demands are not met. Most do feel this is just a negotiations tactic. He will eventually amend or drop some of these proposals, even if it means a late budget. So, although they are optimistic that the budget will be on time, and proposals will not be granted in their current form. We strongly advocated that policy changes should be debated outside the budget, expressed to them that we would rather see a late budget if that meant his proposal is not going through. Mrs. Chris kind of touched on some of the topics that she discussed. We did the same based on those topics as well. We touched upon GBA, the tax cap, and the APPR related to high-stakes testing. We asked for a GA reduction and elimination, and they were confident that the the GA will be a thing of the past within 3 years, with us getting partial reduction each year until elimination. We're very pleased considering the district has lost $12 million in aid because of GA. We stated to them that we oppose 50% of APPR evaluation, be based on state test scores. We oppose independent observers conducting classroom observations, and spoke about the opt-out movement within our district and how our parents and the community are outraged over these tests and APR. An invite was actually extended to Senator Flanagan to hold a forum at one of our buildings where parents from the district could come ask questions, be briefed and updated on what is going on in Albany. We're hoping to set something up very shortly with board approval. Hopefully it gets back to us. This was basically a very enlightening experience for me during a crucial time for public education. The needs for the Hauppauge School District may differ from other school districts, which made it extremely important for us to sit face-to-face with our representatives and communicate to them our main concerns and distresses. And I'd also like to thank James for coming with me and really showing me the ropes up there. It's my first time going, and it was really a great experience. Hoping more will come next year.
Mr. Succio, anything to add to that?
No, Mr. Kiley covered everything. Wonderful. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Specifically as to the high-stakes testing, as we're calling it, what was the general reception from the people that you spoke to, or the politicians you spoke to concerning this?
Well, Croce was very receptive towards it. I mean, his parents were teachers, you know, he's very much well against it. The other two were kind of a little wishy-washy, I guess.
Who were the other two?
Patrick and Flanagan.
I think
Yeah.
that, Senator Flanagan made a comment about opt-out, not only to Mr. Kiley and myself privately when we met with him, but also to all of the school board members that were there, that he does feel that it's irresponsible for parents to opt out. That is his personal opinion. We did discuss the high-stakes testing. I believe everybody agreed that changes do need to be made to testing, that we are over-testing our children, and that the APPR is complicating this whole testing matter as well. Even the Vice Chancellor of the Board of Regents has indicated that the changes do need to be made with the amount of testing of our children. The 50%, as the superintendent mentioned, nobody believes that will happen, but we do believe, and everybody seems to believe, that we could be at 35-40% for APPR.
As part of a budget compromise? Or
As a part of, it is lots of discussion. We advocated strongly, and that all policy should be outside the budget. Although there have been years, and we were reminded there were years like last year that did benefit us, but we advocated that policy discussions should be outside of the budget. But yeah, yes, it does appear that could be, very much will be a part of the budget.
I think it's important to understand that a lot of the genesis of what we're dealing with now really wasn't because of school districts like ours. It really was a push for the Big Five, the 5 cities across the state, whose graduation rates and student success rates are really very, very low. So I think the frustration is that while the push for APPR and making these sweeping changes and bringing in Common Core and giving different pathways began there, it broadly swept all of us. And I heard the same comment from Senator Flanagan in terms of irresponsible, but I think what he was saying was the following. Prior to this broad sweep, our children took these tests. They took ELA and math tests in these grades. That was not the issue. So why are we making those tests the issue? I don't want anyone to string me up here after this. I'm just relaying what I heard. The tests in and of themselves should not be the issue. Total understanding that the Common Core tests came out way too soon, and that was a big problem. But the ELA and the math tests shouldn't be the issue. What really compounded everything was the APPR when you added all of the slows and those other tests that are just not necessary. But the other piece that we can't forget about is that those tests only affect a small portion of our staff. So the unfairness of the way everything was rolled out, they affect the teachers in the high school, yes, but they affect grades 3 through 8 if you teach English, social studies, or science. If you don't, they don't affect you. So that's another, the disproportionate nature of APPR is another issue. But I think that's what the senator was saying, at least that's how he expressed it to us, that opting out may not be the answer. The real answer should be changing the legislation that drives all of those additional tests.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from the board concerning Mr. Kiley's report?
Not on this, but Kylie's. On policy, I just have a question. When, I know last year we had spoken about it, and I was wondering when the policy committee was going to get to a policy on filming the board meetings.
To the extent, well, it did come up in the policy committee. We discussed it. There were certain issues with that we deferred to the intellectual property people, not intellectual property, but our computer people, as far as storage and/or maintenance of the films, and also with our attorney concerning whether those are how long we have to keep them, where we have to keep them, and the access to the public. I'm not sure exactly where we are in that process. Pat, do you know? Okay, we'll follow up on it. My understanding or my remembrance was it was stuck with the IT people. Before I said intellectual property, I meant IT.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions concerning policy committee or committee reports? Okay. Number 9 on the agenda, policies. There are none on today. Correspondence sent to the district. The list of correspondence sent is located where it always is. Discussion matters. Ms. Chris noted that there's an addition here. If you want to, I know you touched on it, but maybe we can explain a little bit more.
Sure, I think I explained most of it. A group got together, an ad hoc kind of group of superintendents and the head of the education department at Post and someone from Dowling, and discussed the issues that we're dealing with and another way to advocate on behalf of school districts, really against the governor, to reuse Jim's phrase, holding us hostage, holding state aid hostage to his reform agenda. So it's a very brief summary, so if you just beg my indulgence, I'll read the letter to you. It's, Dear Lawmaker, every day nearly 3 million children and adolescents attend New York State's public schools, upstate and downstate, rural, urban and suburban, small, medium and large. The variety is immense. It may be painfully true that the 109,000 students attend failing schools in New York State, but it also means that between 2.8 and 2.9 million students are attending successful schools. That's the big 5 issue that I was referring to earlier. Even in successful schools, we are familiar with a certain percentage of our children who do fail. We are constantly looking for ways within those systems to discover new and better methods to teach those struggling students and eliminate failure from the landscape of our public schools. However, we must continue to support the segments of our system that create success. In fact, they should be celebrated and replicated where possible. The current effort at state reform, rather than focusing on our successes and supporting what works effectively, appears to focus only on the state's failures. Failures can never be ignored and do in fact need to be fixed, but not at the expense of damaging what creates our successful schools. And then it has 4 independent sentences. The governor's agenda is connecting the politics of state aid to education policy At what cost? The governor's agenda is failing to provide assistance to struggling schools. At what cost? The governor's agenda is removing control of our schools from our local communities. At what cost? And at what cost do we over-test our students? It must not be at the cost of our children and our communities. New York's public schools include many that sustain student learning at high levels and also some schools that fall below everyone's expectations. We believe the best use of our resources allows schools that work to continue to do so and, at the same time, to support schools that need help to engage their students at the level we expect of all children. In a state as varied as New York, a one-size-fits-all approach to school improvement is bound to damage schools that already engender student success while dissipating the focused support that failing schools require to meet the needs of their students. We urge the legislature to refrain from enacting the governor's proposals without thoughtful debate. Sincerely, and then there are about 70 signatures so far to this document.
And Ms. Chris has signed the document as well. This issue now is before the board as to whether the board would like me, on behalf of the district's Board of Education, to also sign on to the letter. Does anyone have feelings, pro, con?
I just have a question. I noticed that not only did the president of Levittown School District sign, but it seems like all the members of the board signed. And I noticed a PTA or a PTSA or a council president in there as well. Is that something that we would like to open up to our PTA council president?
Oh, we certainly could, and I think if Levittown had everyone sign them, I think the original intent was to have the representatives,
Just a
the
representative of
superintendent,
each
the board,
board
and we can
president.
certainly pass it on to our
Okay.
council president.
Okay. With that being said, I'd like to make a motion for Mr. Barchet to sign the Alliance to Save Public Education letter on behalf of the board.
Very good. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Fortmeyer. Discussion? Just briefly, I will note that the board, I believe at our last meeting, authorized me to also send a letter to Governor Cuomo, which is somewhat tangentially related to this, but more directly asking him to decouple the budget and his reform, quote-unquote, reform agenda. I do view this as while somewhat overlapping, it does raise other points that we have not yet acted on as a board, so I would support the motion, and I applaud Superintendent Chris for taking the initiative and signing the letter in advance. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0, 1 abstention. In accordance with that, I will sign the letter Thursday morning. Any other, there are no other discussion matters. Any new business? Any members on the board? Any new business from administration?